The fluorescent lights of Miller's grocery buzzed overhead as Brandon Johnson pushed his empty cart through the produce section. His mind focused on nothing more than grabbing some apples and getting home to his empty apartment. 7 months had passed since the divorce papers were signed, 7 months since he'd walked away from the biggest mistake of his life, and 7 months since he'd seen Camille. That's when he saw her. She stood by the organic vegetables, one hand resting on her lower back, the other carefully selecting tomatoes. But it wasn't her familiar grace or the way her dark curls caught the light that made his world stop spinning. It was the unmistakable curve of her belly beneath her bright blue maternity dress. 7 months pregnant. Brandon's grip tightened on the shopping cart handle until his knuckles turned white. His breath caught in his throat as the math crashed through his mind like a freight train. 7 months pregnant. 7 months since their divorce. 8 months since their last night together as husband and wife. She never did it. She never had the abortion. The memory hit him like a physical blow. That terrible night when she told him about the pregnancy, her eyes shining with joy and hope. "Brandon, we're having a baby," she'd whispered, her hands trembling as she showed him the positive test. And instead of pulling her into his arms and spinning her around like he should have, like every fiber of his being wanted to, he'd said the words that destroyed everything. "We can't afford a baby right now, Camille. My business is drowning. We're drowning. Maybe we should consider other options." The light had died in her eyes that moment. The hope crumbled. And 3 weeks later, she'd handed him divorce papers with tears streaming down her face. "I won't stay married to a man who doesn't want his own child," she'd said. "I won't force you into a life you clearly don't want." Now, watching her carefully place tomatoes in her cart, he saw the truth written in every careful movement, every protective gesture toward her belly. She'd chosen their child over their marriage. She'd chosen love over his fear. Camille turned slightly, and for one heart-stopping moment, their eyes met across the produce section. Her face went pale, and Brandon saw her hand instinctively move to protect her stomach. Even now, even carrying his child, she was protecting their baby from him. How could you let her go through this alone? What kind of man walks away from the woman he loves when she needs him most? The questions hammered through his mind as he watched her quickly look away, her movements becoming hurried, desperate to escape. She abandoned her cart and walked quickly toward the exit, leaving behind the groceries she'd carefully selected. Brandon dropped his own cart and followed, his heart pounding with each step. He had to talk to her. He had to know about the baby. He had to know if there was any chance, any possibility that she could forgive him for being the biggest fool who ever lived. But by the time he reached the parking lot, she was already driving away in her old Honda, the same car that had been making strange noises even before their divorce. He stood there in the cold evening air, watching her taillights disappear into traffic, and felt the weight of 7 months of loneliness and regret settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. That night, Brandon sat in his sparse apartment, staring at his phone. He typed her number a dozen times, then deleted it. What could he say? "Sorry I abandoned you and our unborn child because I was scared of being poor? Hope you're doing well carrying the baby I said we couldn't afford?" Sleep didn't come easy. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her protective hand on her belly, saw the fear in her eyes when she recognized him. He'd put that fear there. He'd made the woman he loved afraid of him. The next morning brought no relief, only the harsh reality that Camille Washington, the woman he'd sworn to love and protect, was 7 months pregnant with his child and facing it completely alone because of his cowardice. What if you never see her again? What if you lose your only chance to be the father and husband they deserve? Can you really live with that regret for the rest of your life? Subscribe and share your thoughts below. Do you think Brandon deserves a second chance, or has he lost the right to be part of his child's life? Your opinion matters to this story's journey. Brandon spent that entire day driving through Camille's old neighborhoods, hoping for another glimpse of her, another chance to at least try to make things right. Because seeing her pregnant had awakened something in him that 7 months of loneliness couldn't touch. It wasn't just regret or guilt, though those emotions tore through him like wildfire. It was love. Pure, desperate, all-consuming love for both Camille and the child they'd created together. By evening he'd made a decision. He might have been a coward 7 months ago, but he wouldn't be one anymore. He was going to find Camille, and he was going to spend every remaining day of her pregnancy proving that he could be the man she and their baby deserved. Even if it was too late for their marriage, it wasn't too late for him to be a father. The question that kept him awake that second night wasn't whether he could find her. It was whether she'd let him close enough to try. Brandon had always prided himself on being a man who could fix things. Broken pipes, cracked foundations, damaged roofs, he could handle it all with his hands and the right tools. But 8 months ago, when his world started falling apart, he discovered that some things couldn't be fixed with a hammer and nails. Johnson Construction had been his dream since he was 12 years old, watching his father lay bricks and pour concrete. By 25, Brandon had built it into a respectable business with 6 employees and more work than he could handle. That's when he met Camille Washington at a community center fundraiser, where her nonprofit was partnering with local contractors to build a playground. She wore a bright red dress that day, and when she smiled at him over the blueprints, Brandon knew his bachelor days were over. Camille was everything he'd never known he wanted. She was smart, working as a social worker helping families in crisis. She was kind, always putting others before herself. She was strong, having worked her way through college and graduate school on her own after aging out of the foster system. Most importantly, she believed in him. When other people saw just another construction worker, Camille saw a man building something meaningful. She celebrated every contract he won, every employee he hired, every family whose home he helped repair. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony at the community center where they met. Brandon wore his best suit, and Camille wore a flowing white dress that made her look like an angel. Her foster mother, Mrs. Patterson, walked her down the aisle since Camille had no other family. Brandon's parents and 3 sisters filled the rest of the church, immediately adopting Camille as one of their own. The first 3 years of marriage were the happiest of Brandon's life. They bought a small house with a big backyard, perfect for the children they both wanted. Camille talked about converting the spare room into a nursery someday, her eyes bright with dreams of tiny cribs and mobiles spinning overhead. But then the economy shifted. Construction work slowed down. Big developers started choosing cheaper, less reliable contractors. Brandon's biggest client defaulted on a payment, leaving him unable to pay his workers for 2 weeks. He had to let 4 employees go, keeping only his most loyal crew. The stress ate at him like acid. He stopped sleeping well. He snapped at Camille over little things, then hated himself for taking his frustration out on the one person who deserved it least. He worked longer hours for less money, trying to keep the business afloat while watching their savings account drain away. Camille never complained. She picked up extra hours at the nonprofit, bringing in what money she could while still managing to keep their home peaceful and warm. She made his favorite meals on a budget that would have challenged a saint, never once mentioning that they hadn't gone out to dinner in 4 months. When the bank called about their mortgage payment being late, Brandon felt like he was drowning. He'd always been the provider, the one who took care of problems. Now he couldn't even keep their lights on without stress and careful planning. That's when Camille came home with the pregnancy test. Brandon was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and collection notices. His head was in his hands, trying to figure out how to make numbers work that simply wouldn't cooperate. He heard her footsteps on the hardwood floor, heard her soft intake of breath as she saw the mess of papers. "Brandon," she said quietly, and something in her voice made him look up. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, her hands behind her back, wearing scrubs from her shift at the hospital where she counseled families in crisis. Her dark eyes held a mixture of joy and nervousness that he couldn't quite read. "I have something to tell you," she said, bringing her hands forward to reveal the small white stick. The 2 pink lines were clear as daylight. For one perfect moment, Brandon felt pure joy flood through him. Baby. Their baby. The child they dreamed about, planned for, wanted so desperately. He saw Camille's hopeful smile, saw her hand drift protectively to her still flat stomach. Then his eyes fell back to the collection notices spread across their kitchen table. "We're having a baby," Camille whispered, her voice full of wonder and love. And Brandon, drowning in debt and fear, said the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We can't afford a baby right now, Camille. My business is drowning. We're drowning. The mortgage is 3 months behind. I haven't paid my workers in a week. Maybe we should consider other options." The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon watched the light fade from Camille's eyes, watched her protective hand press more firmly against her stomach, watched her dreams crumble in real time. "Other options," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "I'm not saying we have to," Brandon said quickly, hating himself even as the words came out. "I'm just saying maybe we should think about whether this is the right time." Camille turned and walked to their bedroom without another word. Brandon heard the door close, heard the lock click into place. He sat alone in the kitchen with his bills and his cowardice, knowing he'd just broken something precious that might never be whole again. She didn't speak to him for 3 days. When she finally did, it was to ask him a single question. "Do you want this baby, Brandon? Not can we afford it, not is the timing right. Do you want our child?" And Brandon, still drowning in fear and financial panic, gave her an honest answer that destroyed them both. "I don't know." 2 weeks later, Camille moved in with Mrs. Patterson. A week after that, she filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but Brandon knew the truth. He'd failed as a husband when she needed him most. He'd chosen his fear over their love. Now, 7 months later, seeing her pregnant and alone, Brandon finally understood what he'd thrown away. Not just a marriage but a family. Not just a wife, but a woman who would have stood by him through anything if he'd just had the courage to stand by her. The worst part wasn't even his own regret. It was knowing that Camille had faced the last 7 months alone. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night wondering about the future, every moment of joy at feeling their baby kick, she'd experienced it all without the man who'd promised to love and protect her forever. Brandon stared out his apartment window at the city lights and made himself a promise. He might not be able to change the past, but he could spend whatever time remained proving he was ready to be the father and partner they deserved. Even if it was 7 months too late. The next 3 days passed in a blur of restless energy and careful planning. Brandon found himself driving past Miller's grocery every evening around 6, hoping to catch another glimpse of Camille. On Thursday, his patience was rewarded. She emerged from the store carrying 2 small bags, moving slowly and carefully. Brandon parked across the street and watched as she loaded her groceries into the back seat of her Honda. The car was older now, showing more rust around the wheel wells, and when she started it, even from his distance he could hear the engine cough and struggle. When she pulled out of the parking lot, Brandon followed at a careful distance. He wasn't proud of what he was doing, but he needed to know where she lived, needed to understand how she was managing on her own. The drive led through increasingly modest neighborhoods until Camille turned into the parking lot of Sunset Gardens Apartments, a complex that had seen better days but was clean and well-maintained. She parked in front of Building C and Brandon watched from the street as she gathered her groceries and made her way slowly up an exterior staircase to the second floor. Apartment 2C. He memorized the number and the sight of her bright green maternity top disappearing behind a door that needed a fresh coat of paint. That weekend, Brandon drove past the complex several times, each visit adding details to his mental picture of Camille's new life. The parking lot had several other pregnant women and young mothers, suggesting the apartments were affordable family housing. There was a small playground behind the buildings where children played while their parents watched from nearby benches. On Sunday morning he saw her again. She emerged from her apartment wearing a purple maternity dress and carrying a small purse, walking carefully down the stairs. She was going to church, he realized, probably Mount Calvary Baptist where they used to attend together. The urge to follow her there was overwhelming, but Brandon forced himself to drive away instead. Church was her sanctuary and he wouldn't invade that space. He'd caused her enough pain already. Monday evening brought rain, and Brandon was parked across from the grocery store when he saw Camille's Honda pull into the lot. Through the downpour, he watched her hurry into the store, her hands protecting her belly from the weather. 20 minutes later, she emerged with her groceries, but the rain had gotten worse. Brandon watched her struggle to load her bags while trying to stay dry, and every instinct screamed at him to help. But he stayed in his truck, knowing his presence would only upset her. Camille drove home through the heavy rain, and Brandon followed at his usual careful distance. But as she turned into the apartment complex, her Honda suddenly veered to the right and came to a stop in a parking space with steam rising from under the hood. Brandon pulled over and watched as Camille sat in her car for several long moments, probably waiting for the engine to cool down. When she finally got out, she popped the hood and stared at the engine like she was hoping divine intervention might fix whatever was wrong. This time Brandon couldn't stay away. He grabbed an umbrella from behind his seat and jogged across the street. Camille looked up as he approached, and he saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her face went pale and her hand moved instinctively to her belly. "Car trouble?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the way his heart was hammering. "It's fine," Camille said quickly, stepping back from the engine. "I'll call someone." "In this rain? Let me just take a quick look." Brandon moved to the front of the car and immediately saw the problem. A radiator hose had burst, spraying coolant everywhere. It was an easy fix, but not something that could be done in a parking lot during a rainstorm. "Your radiator hose blew," he said, closing the hood. "You'll need to have it towed." Camille looked at the rain, then at her groceries in the back seat, then at her apartment building across the parking lot. Brandon could see her calculating the cost of a tow truck, the cost of repairs, the logistics of getting everything upstairs in the downpour. "I'll carry your groceries up," he offered. "No," she said immediately. I can manage. Camille, it's pouring rain, you're 7 months pregnant and those bags are heavy. Please let me help. She looked at him for a long moment, rain dripping from her hair despite the umbrella he was trying to share with her. He could see the war playing out on her face between pride and practical necessity. Practical necessity won. Just the groceries, she said firmly. Then you leave. Brandon nodded and gathered the bags from her car while Camille locked up and started toward the building. He followed her up the exterior staircase, noting how she had to pause twice to catch her breath. The pregnancy was clearly taking its toll, especially in her final trimester. She unlocked the door to 2C and stepped inside, holding it open just wide enough for him to pass the grocery bags through. Brandon caught a glimpse of a small but tidy living room, a couch with a bright yellow throw pillow, and what looked like a bassinet in the corner. Thank you, Camille said, taking the bags. You can go now. But Brandon couldn't move. Standing this close to her, seeing the apartment where she was preparing to raise their child alone, the words came tumbling out before he could stop them. I'm sorry, he said. God, Camille, I'm so sorry. I was scared and stupid and I said things I never should have said. I've regretted it every single day for 7 months. Camille's grip tightened on the grocery bags. It's too late for apologies, Brandon. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But the baby? Is the baby healthy? Are you okay? Are you getting good medical care? For a moment, her defensive wall cracked and he saw the exhaustion underneath. The loneliness. The fear of facing everything ahead by herself. We're fine, she said quietly. The baby's due in 2 months. Everything looks normal. Good. That's good. Brandon hesitated, then pulled out his wallet. Let me pay for the car repairs. Please. It's the least I can do. I don't want your money. It's not charity, Camille. It's responsibility. I should have been helping all along. She was quiet for so long that Brandon thought she might close the door in his face. But finally she sighed. I'll pay you back. You don't have to pay me back. I want to do this. Camille met his eyes for the first time since he'd walked away from their marriage. This doesn't change anything between us, Brandon. 1 car repair doesn't make up for 7 months. I know, he said. But maybe it's a start. She closed the door without responding, but she hadn't said no to the help. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't a complete rejection either. As Brandon walked back to his truck through the rain, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 months. Hope. Camille had accepted his help, even reluctantly. She'd let him close enough to see where she lived, to know she was preparing for their child. It was more than he deserved and less than he wanted, but it was something. Tomorrow he would arrange for her car to be fixed. And maybe, if he was very careful and very patient, he could find other ways to help without making her feel cornered or pressured. He might have lost the right to be her husband, but he was determined to earn the right to be their child's father. Even if he had to prove himself one small gesture at a time. Tuesday morning, Brandon called Patterson's Auto Repair, a shop he'd used for his work trucks. He explained that he needed a car towed from Sunset Gardens Apartments and repaired, but the owner shouldn't know who was paying for it. Just tell her an anonymous donor covered the costs, Brandon said. Can you do that? Sure thing, Brandon. Happen to know this lady? Something like that. By afternoon, Brandon was driving past the apartment complex when he saw the tow truck loading Camille's Honda. He pulled over and watched her talking to the driver, probably getting information about when the car would be ready. That evening, he drove past again and saw her walking slowly around the parking lot, one hand pressed to her lower back. Even from a distance, he could see she was uncomfortable. Brandon had done enough research in the past few days to know that back pain was common in the final trimester, especially for women who were on their feet a lot. Wednesday brought no sign of Camille, but Thursday afternoon Brandon's phone rang. It was Patterson's Auto Repair. That Honda's ready, the mechanic said. But there's a problem. The lady came to pick it up and when I told her it was already paid for, she got pretty upset. Kept asking who paid, said she wouldn't take charity. She's been sitting in our waiting room for 2 hours, won't take the car until she knows who covered the bill. Brandon sighed. He should have known Camille wouldn't simply accept anonymous help. She was too proud, too independent. Tell her I'll be right there, Brandon said. You want me to tell her you're coming? No. Just, be ready for fireworks. Patterson's Auto Repair was a small family business on the east side of town, the kind of place where they still checked your oil and cleaned your windshield. Brandon pulled up just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Through the window of the waiting room, he could see Camille sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her hands resting on her belly. She wore a bright red maternity top and black pants, and even frustrated and tired, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Brandon took a deep breath and walked inside. Camille looked up as the door chimed, and her eyes widened when she saw him. "I should have known," she said, struggling to get up from the low chair. "Don't get up," Brandon said quickly, but she was already on her feet. "You paid for my car." "Yes. After I specifically told you I didn't want your money. You said you didn't want charity." "This isn't charity, Camille. It's me taking care of something I should have been handling all along. You don't get to decide what I need, Brandon. You lost that right 7 months ago." The mechanic behind the counter cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Should I give you folks some privacy?" "No," Camille said firmly. "We're leaving. Both of us. Separately." But as she took a step toward the door, she suddenly gasped and grabbed the back of the chair. Brandon was beside her in an instant. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just, the baby's been really active today. Sometimes when I stand up too fast." She pressed her hand to her side and took a slow breath. "Sit back down." "I'm fine." "Camille, please. Just sit for a minute." This time she let him help her back into the chair. The mechanic brought her a bottle of water, and Brandon knelt beside her, fighting the urge to put his hand over hers on her belly. "Better?" he asked after she'd had some water. "Yes, it happens sometimes. The baby gets in a position that makes it hard to move around." "How often?" "It doesn't matter how often. It matters to me." Camille looked at him for a long moment. "Why, Brandon? Why do you care now? Where were you when I was sick every morning for 3 months? Where were you when I had to go to doctor appointments alone? Where were you when I felt the baby kick for the first time and had nobody to share it with?" Each question hit him like a physical blow. Brandon sat back on his heels and met her eyes. "I was scared," he said simply. "I was drowning in debt and fear, and instead of fighting for our family, I ran. It was the worst mistake I ever made, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." "That's not good enough." "I know it's not. But I'm here now and I'm not running anymore. Let me pay for the car, Camille. Let me help with whatever you need. Not because you have to accept it, but because I need to do something right." Camille was quiet for a long time, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly. Finally she sighed. "The car repairs, that's it. I don't want anything else from you. Okay? And this doesn't mean we're friends again. This doesn't mean I forgive you. I understand. I'm only accepting because I need reliable transportation before the baby comes, and I can't afford to fix it myself." Brandon nodded and stood up. He walked to the counter and paid the bill, then came back with the keys. "Thank you," Camille said quietly. "You don't have to thank me." She stood up more carefully this time, and Brandon walked with her to her car. The Honda looked good, better than it had in months. The mechanic had even washed it. "Camille," Brandon said as she opened the driver's door. "Can I ask you something?" She paused but didn't look at him. "Are you scared? About doing this alone?" For a moment her careful composure cracked. He saw the exhaustion, the worry, the overwhelming weight of preparing for motherhood without a partner. "Every day," she whispered. "But scared is better than disappointed." She got in the car and drove away, leaving Brandon standing in the parking lot with the weight of her words settling on his chest. Scared is better than disappointed. That's what he'd done to her. He'd made her so afraid of being hurt again that facing single motherhood seemed safer than trusting him. But she'd accepted his help with the car. She'd let him sit with her when the baby was making her uncomfortable. She'd been honest about being scared. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd dared hope for a week ago. Brandon drove home with a new understanding of what he was up against. Camille's walls weren't just about pride or anger. They were about survival. She'd built them to protect herself and their child from the kind of devastating disappointment he'd caused before. If he wanted a chance to be part of their lives, he'd have to prove he was worth the risk of trusting again. And he had less than 2 months to do it. The next morning, Brandon stood in the floral section of Miller's Grocery, staring at an array of flowers and feeling completely out of his depth. "What kind of flowers did you send to your pregnant ex-wife to say, 'I'm sorry I was a coward, but I'm trying to change,' without seeming pushy or desperate?" "Can I help you?" asked an elderly woman arranging bouquets nearby. "I need flowers for someone special," Brandon said. "But it's complicated." "Complicated how?" "She's my ex-wife. She's pregnant with my baby and I messed up badly. I want to show her I care without making her feel pressured." The woman studied him for a moment. "What's her favorite flower?" "Sunflowers," Brandon said without hesitation. "She always said they were happy flowers." "Then sunflowers it is. But not too many." 3 or 4 stems, simple and sweet. Brandon bought a small bouquet of sunflowers and drove to Camille's apartment complex. He climbed the stairs to 2C and left the flowers by her door with a simple note. "Thank you for letting me help yesterday. I hope these make you smile. B." Then he went to work, spending the day installing cabinets in a kitchen remodel and trying not to think about whether Camille had found the flowers. That evening, as he drove past the complex, he saw that the flowers were gone from her doorstep. Either she'd taken them inside, or she'd thrown them away. He chose to believe the former. Friday morning brought a call from his bank that changed everything. "Mr. Johnson? This is Carol from First National. I have some interesting news about your construction business." Brandon's stomach dropped. More bad news was the last thing he needed. "Montclair Development Group has been asking about you," Carol continued. "They want to discuss a major contract. Apparently, someone recommended your work." "Montclair Development? They're huge." "I know. They'd like to meet with you Monday morning. This could be exactly what your business needs." Brandon hung up the phone in a daze. Montclair Development handled multi-million-dollar projects across the state. If they were serious about hiring Johnson Construction, it could solve all his financial problems overnight. But first he had a weekend to get through and a woman to convince that he'd changed. Saturday morning, Brandon was grocery shopping when he had an idea. He remembered how Camille used to love the elaborate fruit salads from Romano's Deli, but they were expensive and she'd stopped buying them during their financial troubles. He bought all the ingredients and spent 2 hours in his kitchen creating the perfect fruit salad, just the way Camille liked it, with strawberries, pineapple, grapes, and mandarin oranges. He packaged it carefully in a clear container with a note. "Thought you and the baby might enjoy something sweet. Eat healthy. B." This time he didn't leave it at her door. Instead, he waited until he saw her leave for what looked like a grocery run, then left the fruit salad in a cooler bag by her door where it would stay fresh until she returned. Sunday, he left a small potted plant, something green and cheerful, for her apartment. Monday, it was a book of baby names he'd found at a used bookstore. Tuesday, a gift card to a maternity store. Never anything too expensive or personal, just small gestures that said, "I'm thinking of you," without demanding anything in return. Thursday evening, Brandon was leaving work when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" "Stop." It was Camille's voice, quiet but firm. "Camille? Stop leaving things at my door. Stop following me around. Just stop." Brandon pulled over to the side of the road. "I wasn't trying to stalk you. I just wanted to help." "I don't need help. I need space." "I know you don't need help. But you deserve support and I should be the one giving it to you." "You don't get to decide what I deserve, Brandon. You made your choice 7 months ago. I made the wrong choice. I'm trying to make better ones now." There was a long silence. When Camille spoke again, her voice was tired. "The flowers were nice. And the fruit salad. But you can't just show up in my life with gifts and expect everything to be okay. I don't expect that." "Then what do you expect?" Brandon closed his eyes and tried to find the right words. "I don't expect anything, Camille. I just hope. I hope that maybe someday you'll give me a chance to prove I'm not the same man who walked away from you. And if I don't? If I decide I want nothing to do with you? Then I'll respect that. But I'll still want to be part of our child's life if you'll let me." Another long silence. "No more gifts," she said finally. "Okay. And no more showing up places where I am." "Okay. If you want to help, you can pay child support after the baby's born. That's it." "Camille, Brandon stopped himself. She was setting boundaries and he needed to respect them. "I understand." She hung up without saying goodbye. Brandon sat in his truck on the side of the road and felt the weight of reality settle on his shoulders. Camille wasn't ready to trust him again, maybe never would be. But she wasn't completely shutting him out either. She'd mentioned child support, which meant she was planning to let him be part of the baby's life in some capacity. It was less than he wanted, but more than he deserved. That night, Brandon did something he hadn't done since the divorce. He got down on his knees beside his bed and prayed. Not for forgiveness, because he knew he'd have to earn that. Not for Camille to take him back, because he knew that might never happen. He prayed for wisdom. For patience. For the strength to be the father his child deserved, even if he could never again be the husband Camille needed. And he prayed that somehow, someway, love really could conquer the fear and hurt he'd caused. Monday's meeting with Montclair Development could change his financial situation overnight. But winning back his family was going to take something money couldn't buy. Time, consistency, and faith that some mistakes, no matter how big, could eventually be forgiven. What would you do in Brandon's situation? Is persistence romantic or pushy? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of nervous energy and cautious hope. Brandon put on his best suit, the same one he'd worn to his wedding, and drove to the Montclair development offices downtown. The sleek glass building was intimidating, but he'd learned not to let appearances shake his confidence. The meeting went better than he'd dared dream. Richard Montclair himself, a distinguished man in his 60s, sat across the conference table and outlined a project that would keep Brandon's company busy for the next 18 months. "We're developing a new residential community on the north side," Montclair explained. 50 homes plus a community center. "We need a contractor who understands quality construction and can work within our timeline." "I can handle that," Brandon said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know you can. Patricia Chin spoke very highly of your work." Brandon frowned. "I don't think I know anyone named Patricia Chin." Montclair smiled. "She knows you though. Her nonprofit has worked with your company on several community projects. She said you were the most honest contractor she'd ever dealt with, that you always put quality and integrity above profit." The realization hit Brandon like lightning. Patricia Chin ran the Community Development Alliance, the same nonprofit where Camille worked. Someone had recommended him for the biggest contract of his career, and he had a feeling he knew who. The meeting lasted 2 hours, ending with a handshake and a contract worth more money than Brandon had made in the past 2 years combined. As he walked to his truck, his phone was already buzzing with calls from suppliers and subcontractors he'd had to let go. By evening he could have his full crew back to work. But first he had to see Camille. He drove to her apartment complex, not to leave gifts or spy on her routine, but because he needed to know if she was the one who'd changed his life with a single recommendation. Camille was sitting on the bench near the playground, watching children play while she rubbed her lower back. At 8 months pregnant, every movement looked uncomfortable, but she seemed peaceful in the evening sunlight. Brandon approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up, surprised. "I thought we agreed you wouldn't show up places where I am. This is different. I need to ask you something." Camille sighed but didn't object when he sat down on the other end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance between them. "Did you recommend my company to Montclair Development?" he asked. She was quiet for so long that Brandon thought she might not answer. Finally she nodded. "Why?" "Because you're a good contractor," she said simply. "Because you do quality work and you treat people fairly. Because Patricia needed someone reliable for the biggest project of her career, and despite everything between us, I knew you wouldn't let her down professionally." Brandon felt something crack open in his chest. After everything he'd done, after the way he'd hurt her, Camille had gone out of her way to help his business succeed. "You gave me my life back," he said quietly. "That contract. It's enough work to support my entire crew for the next 1.5 years. It's enough to save my business." "Good. I'm glad." "Why, Camille? After the way I treated you, why would you help me?" She turned to look at him for the first time since he'd sat down. "Because our child deserves a father who can provide. Because I remember the man you used to be before fear made you cruel. And because no matter how angry I am at you, I don't want to see you fail." The simple generosity of it, the way she'd put their child's welfare above her own hurt, made Brandon's eyes burn with unshed tears. "I don't deserve your kindness." "No," Camille agreed. "You don't. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for this baby." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the children play. Brandon noticed how Camille's hand moved constantly over her belly, how she shifted position every few minutes trying to get comfortable. "Can I ask how you're feeling?" "Really feeling?" "Tired," she admitted. "Everything hurts. I can't sleep because the baby kicks all night. I can't eat much because there's no room in my stomach. And I'm scared." "About the birth?" "About everything. About labor and delivery, about taking care of a newborn alone, about being a good mother." She paused. "About you." "About me?" "About what happens when the baby comes. About whether you'll disappear again when things get hard. About whether I should even give you the chance to hurt our child the way you hurt me." Brandon wanted to promise her that would never happen, wanted to swear he'd changed, but he knew words were meaningless now. Only his actions would matter. "What if I prove myself first?" he asked. "What if I show you I'm reliable before the baby comes?" "How?" "Let me help you get ready. Let me come to a doctor's appointment with you. Let me help set up the nursery. Let me be there for the small stuff so you can trust me with the big stuff." Camille was quiet for a long time, her hand tracing patterns on her belly. "One appointment," she said finally. "I have a checkup next Thursday at 2. You can come to that, but you sit quietly and don't ask the doctor a million questions. You're there to observe, not to take over. Thank you. This doesn't mean I trust you again, Brandon. This means I'm giving you one chance to show me you've changed. Don't waste it. I won't. As if on cue, Camille suddenly gasped and pressed both hands to her side. Oh. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The baby's just, here, give me your hand. Before Brandon could think about it, Camille had grabbed his hand and pressed it against her belly. For a moment nothing happened. Then he felt it, a strong, distinct movement against his palm. Their baby was kicking. Brandon's breath caught as he felt another kick, then another. This tiny person, this child they'd created together, was real and strong and very much alive. That's our baby, Camille said softly, watching his face. That's our baby, Brandon repeated, his voice thick with emotion. They sat like that for several minutes, Brandon's hand on Camille's belly, both of them marveling at each movement their child made. For those precious moments, the hurt and anger between them faded away, replaced by shared wonder at the miracle they'd created. When the baby settled down, Brandon reluctantly moved his hand away. Thank you, he said, for letting me feel that. The baby's been so active today. I think all the stress has them worked up. What stress? Camille hesitated, then sighed. Mrs. Patterson had to go into a nursing home last week. Her diabetes got worse and she can't live independently anymore. So I'm really alone now. Brandon's heart ached for her. Mrs. Patterson had been the closest thing to a mother Camille had ever known, the woman who'd taken her in when she aged out of foster care. I'm sorry. I know how much she means to you. She raised me when no one else would. And now she's in a place where I can only visit on weekends because of my work schedule. Camille's voice cracked slightly. She was supposed to be here when the baby came. She was going to help me those first few weeks. I can help you those first few weeks. Brandon, I know you don't trust me yet, but you need support and I need the chance to prove myself. Let me be there. Let me show you I'm not going anywhere this time. Camille looked at him for a long moment, then down at her hands folded over her belly. Come to the doctor's appointment on Thursday, she said. We'll see how that goes first. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Brandon nodded and stood up carefully, not wanting to break the fragile peace between them. I'll see you Thursday at 2, he said. As he walked back to his truck, Brandon felt lighter than he had in months. Camille had given him a chance, one chance to prove he was worthy of being their child's father. He wasn't going to waste it. Thursday afternoon found Brandon sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Sarah Martinez's obstetrics practice, surrounded by pregnant women and their partners. He'd arrived 15 minutes early wearing a button-down shirt and clean jeans, his hands folded carefully in his lap. When Camille walked in precisely at 1:55, wearing a bright blue maternity dress that made her glow, Brandon stood up immediately. Thank you for letting me come, he said quietly. Just remember what I said. You're here to observe. They checked in at the front desk, and Brandon noticed how the receptionist smiled warmly at Camille, clearly familiar with her. During the months they'd been apart, Camille had built relationships here, faced appointments and questions alone, made decisions about their child's health without him. The weight of what he'd missed settled heavily on his shoulders. Camille Washington, a nurse called and they followed her back to an examination room. The walls were covered with ultrasound photos and baby pictures, testimonials to the lives that had begun in this very space. Dr. Martinez entered a few minutes later, a warm woman in her 50s who greeted Camille with genuine affection. How are we feeling today? She asked, then noticed Brandon. And who do we have with us? This is Brandon, the baby's father, Camille said, her voice carefully neutral. Wonderful. It's so nice to meet you, Brandon. Are you excited about becoming a daddy? Yes, ma'am. Very excited. Dr. Martinez had Camille lie back on the examination table and began the routine checkup. Brandon watched, fascinated, as she measured Camille's belly, listened to the baby's heartbeat with a Doppler device, and checked her blood pressure. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Martinez announced. Baby's measuring right on schedule, heartbeat is strong and steady. How are you sleeping? Not great, Camille admitted. The baby's very active at night. That's normal in the 3rd trimester. Baby, are you listening in there? Your mama needs her rest. She turned to Brandon. Dad, you can help by making sure she's comfortable. Extra pillows, back rubs, whatever she needs. Brandon nodded, though he knew Camille was managing alone. Any questions from either of you? Brandon had a million questions, but he remembered his promise to observe quietly. Instead, Camille asked about labor signs and when to come to the hospital. You're at 36 weeks now, Dr. Martinez said, so we're in the safe zone if baby decides to come early. But I think you'll make it to your due date. First babies usually do. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Martinez handed Brandon a folder of information. Everything you need to know about the next few weeks, she said. Labor signs, what to pack for the hospital, newborn care basics. Study up, Dad. You're going to be very busy soon. Outside the medical building, Camille and Brandon walked slowly toward their cars. That went well, Brandon said. Dr. Martinez is wonderful. She's been taking good care of us. I can tell. She clearly cares about you. They reached Camille's Honda and she turned to face him. During the comfort position segment, Linda had the partners practice massage techniques and supportive holds. Okay, partners, your job is to provide counterpressure during contractions, Linda said. Mom, you tell him exactly where you need pressure and how much. Brandon placed his hands carefully on Camille's lower back, applying gentle pressure where she directed. For a moment, it felt natural, like they were really preparing for this together. That's good, Camille said quietly. A little lower. They practiced different positions and techniques for 2 hours, with Brandon following Camille's lead and supporting her however she needed. When they took a break, several other couples commented on how well they worked together. How long have you been married? Asked the woman on the mat next to them. We're not married, Camille said simply, and Brandon felt the familiar pang of regret. During the final hour they watched a video of actual births, and Brandon realized how intense and overwhelming labor would be. The idea of Camille going through that alone, without someone to advocate for her and comfort her, made his chest tight with anxiety. As they packed up to leave, Linda handed each couple a birth plan worksheet. Take this home and discuss what kind of birth experience you want, she said. Pain management options, who you want in the delivery room, music preferences, that kind of thing. Communication is key. In the parking lot, Brandon and Camille walked slowly to their cars. Thank you for letting me come, Brandon said. I learned a lot. You did well. You didn't try to take over or act like you knew everything. I don't know anything. That's why I needed to be there. Camille smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since before their divorce. The breathing techniques will help. And now you know what to expect in the delivery room. Am I going to be in the delivery room? The question hung between them like a bridge they weren't sure they were ready to cross. I don't know yet, Camille said honestly. Ask me again in a few weeks. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Brandon nodded and watched her drive away, feeling like they were making real progress. Monday morning brought the start of the Montclair project, and Brandon threw himself into work with renewed energy. Having a steady income for the next 18 months meant he could focus on proving himself to Camille without the constant stress of financial worry. The project site was buzzing with activity. Brandon's crew of 6 men were back to work, grateful to have steady employment again. The work was challenging but satisfying, building homes that families would love for generations. Richard Montclair visited the site on Wednesday, walking through the framed houses with obvious satisfaction. Excellent work, Brandon, he said. You're ahead of schedule and the quality is exactly what we wanted. Thank you, sir. My crew is motivated to do their best. I can tell. Listen, I have another project starting in the fall. Smaller scale, but it might interest you. A community center for underprivileged youth. Brandon's ears perked up. Community projects were exactly the kind of work that had originally attracted Camille to him. I'd definitely be interested. Good. Patricia Chen will be overseeing that project as well. She speaks very highly of you. That evening, Brandon called Patricia Chen directly. I wanted to thank you for recommending me to Montclair, he said. This contract is going to save my business. You earned that recommendation with years of quality work, Patricia said. But I have to ask, how are things with Camille? Slowly improving, I hope. I'm trying to prove I've changed. Good. That girl has been through enough. She deserves someone who will stand by her. I know. I'm trying to be that someone, even if it's too late for us to be together. After hanging up, Brandon realized how many people cared about Camille, how many lives she'd touched through her work and her kindness. She deserved better than what he'd given her, but maybe it wasn't too late to become the man she deserved. Thursday's doctor appointment went smoothly, with Dr. Martinez pronouncing both mother and baby healthy and ready for birth at any time. 37 weeks, she said. Officially full term. Are you ready? As ready as we can be, Camille replied, glancing at Brandon. Dad, do you have your hospital bag packed? Hospital bag? Dr. Martinez laughed. First-time fathers. Yes, you need a bag too. Change of clothes, snacks, phone charger, camera. You're going to be there for a while. Brandon nodded, making mental notes. He was going to be there. Camille hadn't said it directly, but Dr. Martinez's assumption and Camille's lack of correction felt like permission. After the appointment, they stopped for lunch at a small cafe near the medical building. Camille ordered carefully, trying to find something that wouldn't trigger her heartburn, while Brandon watched her with growing admiration for everything she was handling. "Can I ask you something?" Brandon said over their sandwiches. "Sure." "The birth plan worksheet from class. Have you filled it out?" "Most of it. I want to try natural childbirth, but I'm open to pain medication if I need it. I want the lights dimmed and soft music playing. And I want you there." Brandon's heart nearly stopped. "You want me there?" "If you promise not to faint or get in the way. The baby's going to need both parents, and this is where that starts." "I promise I won't faint. And you won't try to take over or make decisions for me. I'll follow your lead completely." Camille nodded and took another bite of her sandwich. "Good. Because in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to become parents, ready or not." That evening, Brandon packed his hospital bag with the care of someone preparing for the most important event of his life. Change of clothes, toiletries, snacks, phone charger, and a small camera to capture their child's first moments. As he folded an extra shirt, his phone rang. It was his mother. "How's Camille doing, baby?" she asked. "Good. Tired but good. The baby could come any time now." "And how are things between you two?" "Better. She's letting me come to doctor appointments and childbirth class. She wants me in the delivery room when the baby comes." "That's wonderful, Brandon. But what happens after the baby's born?" It was the question that kept Brandon awake at night. He'd been so focused on earning his way back into Camille's life during pregnancy that he hadn't fully considered what came next. "I don't know, Mama. I just know I want to be the best father I can be. And the best husband? If she'll have me. But I'm not counting on that. I hurt her too badly. Love is a powerful thing, son. And you two created something beautiful together. Don't give up hope." After hanging up, Brandon sat in his quiet apartment and thought about the future. In a few weeks, he'd hold his child for the first time. He'd officially become a father, with all the responsibilities and joys that entailed. Whether Camille ever forgave him enough to be a family again remained to be seen. But for the first time in months, Brandon believed it might be possible. After all, miracles had been happening all around him lately. His business was thriving, Camille was trusting him again, and soon they'd welcome their child into the world. Maybe the biggest miracle of all was still to come. The phone call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, jolting Brandon from deep sleep. "Brandon." Camille's voice was tight with anxiety. "I think something's wrong." Brandon was instantly awake, already reaching for his clothes. "What's happening?" "I've been having contractions for the past hour. They're not regular, but they're strong. And I'm bleeding a little bit. I'm on my way." "Are you calling the doctor?" "I already did. She said to come to the hospital." "Don't drive yourself. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Brandon threw on clothes and grabbed his keys, his heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. 38 weeks was full term, but something about Camille's voice told him this wasn't normal labor. He made it to her apartment in 8 minutes and found her sitting on her couch, breathing through a contraction with one hand pressed to her belly and the other gripping the arm of the sofa. "How bad is the pain?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Bad. Different from the practice contractions." Another wave hit her and Camille doubled over, breathing hard. Brandon helped her to his truck, supporting her weight as they made their way carefully down the stairs. The ride to the hospital took 15 minutes that felt like hours, with Camille having 2 more contractions along the way. At Mercy General, they were taken immediately to a labor and delivery room where Dr. Martinez was waiting. "Let's see what's going on," she said calmly, helping Camille onto the bed and hooking her up to monitors. The next hour was a blur of tests and monitoring. The contractions were real but irregular. The bleeding was minor but concerning. The baby's heartbeat was strong, but Camille's blood pressure was elevated. "It's not active labor yet," Dr. Martinez finally announced. "But it's definitely early labor and I'm concerned about the bleeding and your blood pressure, Camille. I want to keep you here for observation." "Is the baby okay?" Brandon asked. "The baby is fine. But Camille's body is showing signs of stress. Sometimes that happens when mom is dealing with too much emotionally or physically." Dr. Martinez gave them a meaningful look. "Camille, is there anything going on at home that might be causing extra stress?" Camille glanced at Brandon, then looked away. "I've been doing everything alone for 8 months. I'm tired." "What about now? Do you have support for when the baby comes?" "Brandon's been helping recently, Camille said quietly. But I don't know what happens after the baby's born. Dr. Martinez nodded understanding. The uncertainty isn't good for you or the baby. You need to know what your support system looks like. She left them alone to rest, and Brandon pulled a chair close to Camille's bed. What can I do? He asked. How can I help reduce your stress? I don't know, Brandon. I'm scared. Of the birth. Of everything. Of labor, of taking care of a newborn, of doing it alone. Camille's voice cracked. Of trusting you and having you disappear again when things get hard. Brandon reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. I'm not disappearing, he said firmly. I made that mistake once and it nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I won't make it again. How do I know that? How do I know you won't get scared when the baby cries all night or when money gets tight again? Because I've been scared for 8 months without you and nothing could be worse than that. Because I'd rather face any challenge with you than face an easy life without you. Camille studied his face in the dim hospital lighting. The doctor's right. I need to know what my support system looks like. What do you want it to look like? I want help with night feedings. I want someone to hold the baby while I shower. I want someone to go to the grocery store when I'm too tired to leave the house. Camille paused. I want someone who won't run when parenthood gets overwhelming. I can be that someone. Can you? Really? Brandon squeezed her hand gently. Let me prove it. Let me move into your guest room for the first month after the baby's born. Let me be there for the night feedings and the grocery runs and the moments when you need a break. If I prove I can handle it, we can talk about something more permanent. And if you can't handle it? Then you'll know for sure and you can make decisions based on that. But Camille, I'm not going anywhere. I love you and I love our baby, and I'm done letting fear make my choices. The monitors showed Camille's blood pressure starting to stabilize as the stress in her face eased. 1 month, she said finally. You can stay for 1 month after the baby's born. But you sleep in the living room, not the guest room. I'm turning that into a nursery. Deal. And if you leave, if you decide parenthood is too hard, you don't get a second chance to come back. I understand. And Brandon? I'm not ready to talk about getting back together. This is about co-parenting, not romance. Brandon's heart ached, but he nodded. Co-parenting. I understand. Camille's contractions gradually stopped over the next few hours, and by morning, Dr. Martinez was satisfied that the immediate crisis had passed. Your blood pressure is back to normal and the baby looks great, she said. But I want you on modified bed rest for the next week. Light activity only, plenty of rest and no stress. I have to work, Camille protested. You have to prioritize this pregnancy. Can you take some time off? Camille looked worried. I have some saved vacation days, but I need to work until the baby comes. I can help with expenses, Brandon offered. Let me cover your bills for the next few weeks so you can rest properly. Brandon? It's not charity. It's taking care of our child by taking care of his mother. Dr. Martinez smiled. That sounds like a good support system to me. They spent the rest of the morning making plans. Brandon would pick up groceries and handle errands. Camille would rest and focus on staying healthy. They would finish setting up the nursery together, and Brandon would be on call 24/7 in case labor started again. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Camille turned to Brandon. Thank you for coming last night. For being there when I was scared. That's what partners do. Co-parents, Camille corrected. Co-parents, Brandon agreed. But in his heart he hoped that someday it might be more. The scare had shaken both of them, but it had also clarified something important. They were in this together now, whether as co-parents or something more. Their child deserved parents who could count on each other, and for the first time in months, it felt like they were building something that could last. As they drove home from the hospital, Brandon caught Camille looking at him with something that might have been the beginning of trust. It was a start. The contractions started again 4 days later, at 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. This time they were different. Stronger, more regular, and accompanied by an unmistakable sense that today was the day. Camille called Brandon, her voice calm but determined. It's time. Are you sure? Oh, I'm sure. These are 5 minutes apart and getting stronger. Brandon was dressed and in his truck within 3 minutes. He found Camille sitting on her couch, timing contractions with an app on her phone, her hospital bag packed and ready by the door. How are you feeling? He asked. Scared. Excited. Ready to meet our baby. Another contraction hit, and Camille breathed through it with the techniques they'd learned in class. And really hoping I can do this. You can do this. We can do this. The drive to Mercy General was calmer this time. with Camille managing her contractions while Brandon focused on getting them there safely. At the hospital, they were taken to the same labor and delivery room where they'd been 4 days earlier. "Well, look who's back," Dr. Martinez said with a smile. "And this time it's the real thing." The examination confirmed what Camille already knew. She was 4 centimeters dilated and in active labor. Their baby would arrive within the next several hours. "Are you ready to become parents?" Dr. Martinez asked. Brandon looked at Camille, who met his eyes and nodded. "We're ready," he said. The next 8 hours were the longest and most intense of Brandon's life. He watched Camille work through each contraction with strength and determination that left him in awe. He held her hand, rubbed her back, fed her ice chips, and provided whatever comfort she needed. "You're amazing," he told her during a brief rest between contractions. "I can't believe how strong you are." "I don't feel strong," Camille panted. "I feel like I'm being run over by a truck." The strongest people are the ones who keep going when they don't feel strong. As labor progressed, the walls between them continued to crumble. The shared intensity of bringing their child into the world created an intimacy that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with trust and partnership. "I need you to talk to me," Camille said during a particularly difficult stretch. "Tell me something good." "Our baby is almost here," Brandon said. "In a few hours we're going to hold our child for the first time. We're going to count tiny fingers and toes. We're going to look into little eyes and see the future. What else? You're going to be an incredible mother. You're kind and patient and strong. Our baby is so lucky to have you. And you? Are you going to be a good father?" "I'm going to try every single day for the rest of my life." At 2:43 p.m., after 18 hours of labor, Camille Washington gave birth to a healthy baby girl weighing 6 pounds 12 ounces. Brandon watched in stunned amazement as Dr. Martinez placed their daughter on Camille's chest, slippery and perfect and crying with impressive volume. "Oh my God," Camille whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at her. Brandon, look at what we made." Their daughter was beautiful beyond words, with Camille's delicate features and Brandon's dark eyes. She had a head full of soft black hair and the tiniest fingernails Brandon had ever seen. "She's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to cut the cord, Dad?" Dr. Martinez asked. Brandon's hands shook slightly as he made the cut that officially separated his daughter from her mother and made her an independent little person in the world. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, preparing the birth certificate. Brandon looked at Camille, realizing they'd never actually settled on a name. "Hope," Camille said softly. "Hope Washington Johnson." "Hope Washington Johnson," Brandon repeated, love overwhelming him at the sound of their daughter's name. The next few hours passed in a blur of tests, measurements, and forms. Hope was declared perfectly healthy, scoring high on all her newborn assessments. She nursed well, slept peacefully, and seemed to study her parents' faces with curious dark eyes. That evening, as visiting hours wound down and the hospital settled into quiet routine, Brandon sat in the chair next to Camille's bed, holding Hope while Camille rested. "She's really here," Camille said softly. "She's really here. I can't believe we're parents." "Best job I've ever had," Brandon said, gently stroking Hope's tiny cheek. Camille watched them together, and Brandon saw something in her expression that made his heart race with possibility. "Camille," he said carefully, "I know we agreed I'd stay for a month to help with co-parenting. But I want more than that. Brandon, I want to marry you again. I want to be a family, not just co-parents. I want to wake up every morning knowing we're in this together." Camille was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Brandon and their sleeping daughter. "You hurt me badly," she said finally. "I know. You made me feel like our baby was a burden instead of a blessing. I was wrong. So completely wrong. If I give you another chance, if I let you back into my heart completely, I need to know you'll stay. No matter what challenges come up, no matter how hard parenthood gets, no matter what life throws at us." Brandon stood up carefully, still holding Hope, and knelt beside Camille's hospital bed. "Camille Washington, I love you more than I ever thought possible. I love you for your strength, your kindness, and the way you chose our daughter even when I was too scared to choose either of you. Will you marry me again? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you and Hope?" Camille looked at him for a long moment, then reached out to touch Hope's tiny hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you again." Brandon leaned forward and kissed her gently, sealing the promise with their sleeping daughter between them. "I love you," he said. "I love you too. Both of you." We followed Brandon and Camille through their journey from heartbreak to healing. Do you believe in second chances? Share your thoughts and subscribe to see more stories of love conquering fear. 3 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning in the community center where they'd first met, Brandon and Camille renewed their wedding vows. Hope slept peacefully in Camille's arms as they promised to love, honor, and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. This time, Brandon meant every word. Their little family of 3 was living proof that love, when combined with commitment and the courage to change, could overcome even the biggest mistakes. And as they danced to their wedding song with hope between them, Brandon knew he'd never take this second chance for granted. Some stories end with happily ever after. But this story was just beginning, with every day offering new opportunities to choose love over fear, trust over doubt, and hope over despair. The name Hope had been perfect after all.